And when we're in that role, we're like, yeah, no, I feel like I need to gain their approval. I need to gain their whatever it is, right? Gain their respect. But in reality, when you look at them from a peer standpoint, like they're a person too, I think that shifts the power dynamics as to how you navigate them.
Do you feel safe enough to go up to your partner and say, I'm having this issue. I'm feeling this way. There's this and this happening and this happening. This is how I feel. This is the story that I'm telling myself. Can we have a conversation about this? Can we together go up and have a dialogue with them? Hey everybody, it's Bianca.
Welcome back, Evolvers. It's Emilia. I am in particular very excited to talk about this episode. I feel like the last two, Bianca, or the last three, I feel like have been more deeper episodes and beautiful. And like I've said every single time after we've been done recording, so deeply meaningful episodes, important for the world. And this one might just be there too.
I was going to say, I don't think this one's any different.
I feel like this one's going to be like a battle cry for anyone who's like in the thick of trying to figure out how to handle and or work with and or manage their monster-in-law.
All I thought of when I saw the title of this is the movie Monster-in-Law with Jane Fonda and J-Lo. That movie's so funny.
So good. And that's exactly how I want to start this episode. So Jane Fonda plays literally the best monster-in-law, like best mother monster-in-law. And that is where this, I don't want to say where the inspiration comes from, because I've had many conversations with clients of mine whose their spouses or partners or boyfriend, girlfriends, whatever, their parents are like literally horrible and don't know where their limits are and whatnot. And we'll get into that in a second. But whether it's, relationships talk coaching, whether it's you and I one-on-one work, whether it's even in our own world, this is a topic that I just feel like does not get enough airtime from the lens that we uniquely at Evolve can contribute to. And I think that the movie is a really great example of how horrible things can feel. Yeah. It's like a living hell. If you have a monster-in-law, it can feel like a living hell. And I don't fully know that from experience, because I feel so grateful to feel the way in which I do in terms of my partner. His mother is extraordinary in comparison to what could have been what I had come into my world. And I feel very blessed for that. And I'm sure he probably feels the same way about my parents. Hopefully. Hopefully. But that doesn't mean that they don't have their quirks and that we haven't had to go through our own process. But like, even when it comes to, other people that I've talked to about this subject, bridging the gap of handling the parents of the person that you really deeply care about, it is a lot of things that are entrenched within how little boundaries we have, how much insecurity comes up, how family dysfunction comes into the dialogue, and how to address it. So you and I are millennials, right? And so we obviously come from different cultures, different backgrounds, whatnot. But it's so interesting how when you and I can both watch Monster-in-Law, that movie with Jane Fonda and J-Lo, there are some things that the fundamental aspects that we can resonate with. And I think anyone watching that movie can resonate deeply with it. And what I think it comes down to is trying to build a relationship with someone where you want to have a beautiful relationship. That saying, though, you can choose your partner, but you can't choose your partner's family. That comes forward. And you and I both know what that's felt like in our own unique situations, right?
Oh,
True or
yeah.
false?
Oh, yeah.
So the topic that we're going to contribute to is how to handle that. And I think brushing back on some very basic fundamentals is what this episode is going to be really getting into. Not super deep, but more so feeling like a high level of that. Because when I find myself in conversations with couples, younger couples, couples that are more millennials, they need this reminder deeply. And so I think that's a great place to start. Thoughts?
There's so many different relationship dynamics that come into play here.
Yeah.
So, number one, the relationship that you have with yourself, the relationship you have with your partner, the relationship the two of you have, and then the relationship that the partner has with their parent, who is the monster in law that you're having a relationship with. So, there's a lot of different relational dynamics happening here. And I've learned so much from you, Em, when it comes to relationships, and I'm so grateful for that. And
Mm.
I think there's two fundamental components of this that really need to be focused on when it comes to if you're struggling with a monster-in-law. Number one is the dialogue that you are having with your partner about the relationship that the two of you are having and what's okay and what's not okay. Number two is then the communication that you and your partner are having with their parent about boundaries, communication, limitations, so on and so forth. But if you're not good within you, you're not going to approach either of those. So where can people start? Let's use this as an example for the people who are already experiencing this, and then we'll refer people to other episodes, because we've already talked about this in other episodes about like how to have conversations with your partner and how to set boundaries and how to speak up for yourself and so on and so forth. So make sure you're subscribed and go back and listen to those episodes if you want more help on that. We're going to be talking specifically to the people who are in the situation, and or if you have friends or anyone in your life that you know is probably in this situation, just, casually slide this into the DMs and be like, hey, you need this.
I suppose. So I think what is really helpful to get started in this is when we often have, and when we're in the thick of it, it's like, oh shoot, I think I have a monster-in-law, right? It's like that identification that you're in the thick of it, and there's some degree of obsessive, controlling, dominant behavior that your mother and or father-in-law is exhibiting. So that could look like they show up unannounced. However, the seating arrangement at the table, it needs to be their way. They might be overly intrusively involved in your life, might have an opinion without it being asked. More often than not, that's being pushed on you. They're domineering and dominating how they believe you should live, you and your partner, whether or not you guys should get a house or a condo, right? Like they're overly involved in you and your partner's life, right? Like that's how you can identify that. And it, but to break it down and then say like, where do we go from there is the challenge. And I think that starting at the fundamental level, that's been really helpful for clients of mine as well as their partners is, number one, recognize that mother or father-in-law is a human too. And I think that that's really important to humanize, because if we just villainize the person from the start, the way in which we navigate is going to be very different, right? Yes, are their behaviors inappropriate? We can acknowledge that. Are there boundaries that are wildly being crossed, and is it in a narcissistic way? That might be true. But at the very deep fundamental component, I think recognizing that they are a human, they have needs, wants, and fears as well. And the reason for their behaviors is not justifiable. However, they are rooted in human basic needs, fears, and or concerns. So starting there, I think, is very helpful for clients to recognize and zoom out, because when we see parents and when we see mother and or fathers-in-laws, inherently, because they're older than you, for the large majority of us, right? There's an unconscious power dynamic. And when we're in that role, we're like, I feel like I need to gain their approval. I need to gain their, whatever it is, right? Gain their respect. But in reality, when you look at them from a peer standpoint, like they're a person too, I think that shifts the power dynamics as to how you navigate them.
Evolve Ventures has a tremendous amount to offer. Not only do they have an ever-growing but still welcoming private Facebook society full of like-minded individuals, they also offer individual coaching. I myself have been coached by both Bianca and Emilia on separate occasions, and it's amazing to look back even a year ago in my life and see how far I've come. You almost don't notice that that you're doing better for yourself over time. Not to mention, Out of the Mud, free live virtual event once a month. Can't think of a better way to spend a Wednesday night. You truly can encapsulate the value that it carries unless you've been there yourself and been part of the conversations and the connections that happen, and just access to that kind of information. The resources are just incredible.
From there, what do? We acknowledge where those controlling, domineering, dominant, unwanted behaviors are really impacting us. And so I'll ask clients often, okay, what bothers you the most about your monster-in-law or your mother-in-law, your father-in-law? And usually a couple things will come to mind, right? They show up unannounced, which is just not okay. I just don't like that, right? It's some type of need that you have for privacy that likely is getting crossed, right? Or they are always talking about how we need to get married in this church, right? There's a need for autonomy that is getting steamrolled, right? So when I hear from someone where the bothersome area is the most prevalent, that's where we can really zoom in on, because what's underneath that is a need that is not being respected. And then I would do the second thing with the client, which is how can we establish a boundary and get really clear on sharing that boundary with your monster-in-law? Because you might think that you've established a boundary, or you might be like, oh, well, they already know that I'm not okay with this. But do they know in a very healthy, clearly communicative manner what need you have that they're unconsciously and maybe unintentionally tramping on? Likely the answer is no, right? And so that is really critical. And I find that more often than not, because we're not well practiced in establishing, setting, and communicating to ourselves what clear boundaries are. And we have an episode for that. But more often than not, it's that, right? We don't know necessarily how to communicate it, especially because it's supercharged with like, oh my God, I need their approval, right? And that's a lot of what we're not communicating to someone that if we imagine them as a peer, we might not have all of that angst with us.
I think the other really critical component of this too, is a lot of the time the partner is enabling the parent, and it's why the dynamic is happening the way that it is. I have a client that she was having this happen really often with her mother-in-law. So her and her husband live with the mother, and the partner initially would not defend his wife when they were having issues, and the partner would always go up to her husband and say, I'm not okay with this, like something needs to change, we need to do this and we need to do that. And he would defend his mother instead of defending his wife, and they weren't showing up as a united front. And it caused a lot of chaos. She wasn't looking for the mother-in-law's approval, but she couldn't say anything. And she didn't feel safe enough to set that boundary with a partner, let alone to then go up to the mother and say, you need to stop doing this, or I don't like this, or, I have a need. Here's my need. Can we have a conversation about this? So yes, 100% to what you said. And also, do you feel like you can talk to your partner? Do you feel safe enough to go up to your partner and say, I'm having this issue. I'm feeling this way. There's this and this happening and this happening. This is how I feel. This is the story that I'm telling myself. Can we have a conversation about this? Can we together go up and have a dialogue with them? Can we show up as a united front and make a decision about how we want our family to be? Again, we've done other episodes on this, but not having these conversations before you get into a serious relationship is what causes things like this to happen later on. Because you didn't have the dialogue of how are we going to show up together? What are your expectations and what are mine? What are your needs and what are mine? What are your wants and what are mine? And agreeing on them and then taking proactive steps forward based on that. These issues happen not for nothing, because we let them. They really do. Like, both people have a hand to play in this, and it really does take proactive leadership to be able to navigate this. And that's really scary. It is. It's why most people just won't do it, because it's easier to just say, well, that's just how they are. And I guess I'm just going to have to get over it. But this is also where resentment builds up. This is where serious marital problems end up happening. This could end up leading to divorce. This could end up leading to massive issues in the family and family dynamics and massive family conflict. One conversation could change everything. And so you having the courage to go up to your partner and or to go up to the in-law and be willing to have an uncomfortable dialogue, or many uncomfortable dialogues until, your need ends up being met. Those are the things that make the difference.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, B. I'm so glad. Because in closing on this episode, it's super important to, yes, of course, go directly to that monster-in-law, but there's some steps that have to happen before. You need to recognize within yourself that ooh, I don't like this. This bothers me. This need is not being met. I'm not okay with this. And then it's another courageous ladder or step to be able to communicate that to your partner and see, are you guys kind of experiencing the same thing? Or if not, why not? Is that really your partner's not experiencing that just because they've been in a unhealthy, dysfunctional control pattern? Or can you guys have a dialogue and show up as a united front? Or maybe your partner can address this with their mother, father, etc. And you don't have to, be the quote unquote bearer of bad news. Maybe they can navigate that and or communicate that on the we's behalf, the relationship's behalf. And, I think people fear conflict and confrontation so much because they're not quite sure within themselves. So the more certainty you can gain around what bothers you and what need is not being met and or what need is being steamrolled over, that you then can communicate to your partner, and then you can communicate that in one way, shape, or form to that mother or father-in-law that has been and become and developed this role as a monster-in-law just simply because some of these skills, some of these techniques haven't been addressed. So if you're someone that is struggling in this arena, we got you. There's so many different techniques that per your unique situation, we have helped so many people in this arena. And it's wild how beautiful of a family dynamic and or a relational dynamic you can have when you start to identify your needs, when you can start to see that mother or father-in-law as a person, and you and your partner can be on the same page and same team when it comes to the unhealthy dynamics or things that bother you guys. So in closing,
that was a really good summary.
Yeah, thank you.
Well said.
Teamwork. Whoa. Okay, so in closing, my episode suggestion is 301. It's a Motivation Monday episode, but it's ultimately building mental resilience and how it never does you dirty. So that's I'm going to leave it at that.
Never does you dirty. 378, the differences and boundaries you need to know. If you haven't seen the movie Monster-in-Law, it's hilarious. I adore Jane Fonda, so go watch that movie and then send us a DM and let us know how it resonated with you.
You know what? We should put that in Evolve Movie Club lineup. I'm going to do that right after this because I think that would be a really good dialogue to talk about.
That's so funny.
Done.
Yeah,
Consider
please. Done. All right, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, everyone.